it's Barb Giamanco here, and I just got off a live coaching lab session with my good friend and sales coach expert, Carol Mahoney. We had a blast. It was the first in a series of events we're doing through the Women in Sales community, right? You can find us on womeninsaleshub.com to learn a little bit more. But I thought it was really fascinating to be part of it. And so one of the participants sent in a great question. So Carol, let's talk about that because it framed a lot of our discussion today. So the question was, what do you do when you have sales managers who have the skill for coaching but not the will for coaching? In other words, they're not doing it even though they know it's important. What tips, suggestions, and do you offer, and why is that happening?
And I was super excited to get this question in because it's the one that I get most often. Why is it that when we know what to do, we just don't do it? And as a coach, I get asked this from people who are salespeople who are asking it about their buyers, managers who are asking it about their salespeople, executives who are asking it about their managers. And I shared with everyone the story of building a house in the country, where if you want to build a house in the country, you can't just like you're in the city, put your house where you want and then pipe the water to it and put the water wherever you want. In the country, you have to find the water first. So when we're asking the question of the will of someone to do something, it's a question of motivation. And motivation is like water. You can't create it and put it in where you want to, like a house in the city. In the country, you actually have to test and find out where there's water, if there's water. Because if there's no water, you can't put it there. Just like you can't put someone's motivation there. If they're not motivated and have the will to coach, to develop their team, or to ask more questions of their buyer or change a certain behavior, or a buyer isn't motivated to change the status quo, you can't create that for them. But if it is there, you can dig for it. You can tap into it. And so I shared with them some of the reasons why that gets in our way. Things like, first, asking your sales manager, if you know that they have the skills and they won't do it, why aren't they? What's the objection that they're giving? Where is that coming from? There's a number of other factors that are going to impact our will to do something. First is, do we have something to model after? If you have a sales manager who knows how to coach but won't, I first would question if they actually do know how to coach, because then it becomes a question of, do they believe coaching will work? The theory of reason action talks about if we don't believe something's going to work, we're not going to do it, whether we know to do it or not. And the modeling talks about if we have never been coached ourselves and we don't know what that looks like, then we're less likely to do it ourselves. And so those are some of the things for sales managers specifically. But again, it relates to every level of a sales organization.
Absolutely. And so the other question that I asked during the conversation that we just had was, what do you do when somebody just doesn't want to do it? I mean, you do the digging, you're looking for the water, it's not there. The well is dry, but it's part of their job, and performance, is. So what do you do? Are they in the wrong role? Do you help them move into something else?
Yeah,
Meaning coaching is a requirement and they won't do it. What do you do?
Well, in terms of coaching, 50% of a sales manager's time should be spent coaching. And so if they're not doing that, what are they doing? All of the fire drills and admin work and pipeline reviews and data number crunching, get your head out of the Excel spreadsheet and in front of your salesperson. And if they're not willing to do that, they're in the wrong role. And so find another role that they would rather be in, maybe engineering or service or something else. Or maybe they'd just rather, sometimes sales managers are brought from being the top salesperson. And the biggest challenge in going from top rep to sales manager is that as a top rep, you're thinking about your pipeline, what's going on with you, and how are you going to improve. And the sales management mindset is all about your team. So it's a different mindset, and some people, that's just not where their motivation lies.
Yeah. Final thing we talked about is, you can't assume somebody just knows how to coach. You can't just kind of pitch them out there. So what do you suggest in terms of getting them comfortable and skilled? Training?
Yes, definitely training. There's 12 factors that impact coaching, which I won't bore everyone with here, but one of the major ones is being able to debrief effectively, to listen and ask questions, to not dominate their own coaching calls. Things like they need to not have a need of approval from their salespeople so that they're strong enough and confident enough to push back, because that's going to happen. So there's all of these things and factors, of course, which you can assess and test for. But again, if if they're not willing to learn new skills, if they're not willing to coach in the first place, then it's not going to matter whether they have all of the skills or not. Oh, yeah. I should say one last thing. When we talk about managers coaching, they can have all of the skills and all of the will and be doing everything perfectly, but if their team isn't willing to change their status quo, then they're not going to be able to be effective. So it always comes back to that well of motivation, both in the manager and the salesperson.
Well, and the final thing you also touched on was that the managers have to actually be allowed the time to do the coaching. Right. So sometimes you can have their bosses saying, oh, yes, it's important, but then there are other institutional barriers being put in their way. So even if they want to do it, sometimes they're being hindered by what's happening with their own boss or the process inside the company. Did we forget anything? I think we covered it.
One thing I would share with people, and you just highlighted it perfectly, Barbara, was that there's the will to change, right? And I actually recommend both for salespeople and for managers and executives, the book Switch, How to Change When Change is Hard by the Heath brothers. And it talks about the elephant, the rider, and the path. Think of the elephant as the steps that you need to take. And the rider is our head, the intelligence. The elephant is our emotions. But we can't take a step forward until the path is laid out. So if you're not allowing your sales manager to spend 50% of their time in coaching, then you're getting them all excited and you're telling them what they need to do and how to do it, but you haven't given them a way to do it.
Yeah. So then it's kind of unfair to try and hold them accountable if you're really not giving them the opportunity to be successful.
Yeah.
Right.
And I will say the majority of sales managers that I work with, actually all of the sales managers that I work with, but the majority of sales managers out there say things that my clients say, like, I don't want my team to become the collateral damage of my shortcomings. And so there are a lot of managers out there that have the will to develop their team. They just need, like I just said, the tapping into their will, the path to get there and the skills to do so.
Well, it was a great segment. I was super excited about that. So thank you very much for joining me as our guest sales coaching expert for the women in sales and in sales leadership positions. We are doing 2 more of these live labs with Carol on July 11th and August the 8th. Again, go to the Women in Sales Community Hub and you can check out the events page to see what we got going on. I'm Barb Giamanco, and Carol, thank you so much. I had a great time.
I did too. Thanks for having me, Barb. And we'll put all of those links too in the comments below so that everybody can get to them. Thanks, everybody.